Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our session about towards the open, interoperable, and ethical real-world spatial web. My name is Ali Hantal. I am the founder and CEO of XR Masters and the senior testbed coordinator at OpenAI Cloud. Before we start, I would like to let you know that there's another session right after this. And this session, I, along with Jan-Erik and James, I'll soon ask them to introduce themselves as well, will be talking about the global nonprofit organization, OpenAI Cloud Association, and the Open Spatial Computing Platform that the team has been working on since 2018. Now, after this, I will invite Julia and Susan from OpenAI Cloud again, and we will provide you with details and videos about actual AR Cloud projects that are on the spatial computing platform. Without further ado, I will turn to James first and ask him to introduce himself, please.
Hey guys, James Jackson, Director of Technology, OpenAI Cloud.
Hello, I'm Jan-Erik. I'm the Managing Director of the OpenAI Cloud Association.
So, I would like to go back to James again, and I will ask him about terminology craziness. But before that, let me show you the picture here is in Ankara Castle, Turkey, where the mayor of Ankara is supporting open and interoperable spatial computing platform. And this was an implementation at the New Year's at Ankara Castle. So, James, what is this all crazy terminology? What is your take on the terminology?
So we've got a growing list of terms here. If we go through them, starting off with AR Cloud, of course our group is called OpenAI Cloud. I think the term AR Cloud was actually coined by Ori, so we probably don't want to drop this one, otherwise we won't get invited back to the next AWE. But no, seriously, AR Cloud is still absolutely a relevant term. It is focused on the connectivity to the real world. So being able to anchor that content, the digital twin, this semantic understanding of the real world, right? But as we go beyond AR Cloud, we start to think about the higher level spatial experiences and how those are built. And we sort of move into spatial web. This is a particular term that we like, the real-world spatial web, because it emphasizes the connection to the web, and that is something that we're really trying to embrace here. We've also got the Metaverse, and Metaverse terminology sort of invokes all different feelings in people, right? Some people think of the Metaverse as being somewhat dystopian, so I think it really depends on the specific scenarios, right? If you're thinking of the Metaverse as a scenario where you've got someone locked in a basement and they're existing in all these different VR worlds, maybe a little bit dystopian. On the other hand, if you bring that back to the real world and AR, and that person is instead running down the beach and looking at virtual dolphins jumping beside them, that's a very different experience, right? So, at the end of the day, it really shouldn't matter what we decide to call it, but we need to sort of agree on a common set of guiding principles, and that's what we're going to touch on next.
Thank you, James. So let's turn to Jan-Erik. What is OpenAI Cloud Association?
It is a global volunteer-led nonprofit that is advocating for a spatial computing future that is based on open standards and protocols, as well as ethical best practices.
Thank you, James. Jan-Erik. So, what are the guiding principles of OpenAI Cloud?
Yeah, so we'll run through these. I'll take the first one. So, building on web principles. This is rather broad, but if we think back to the early days of the web, and we can think about the environment in which the web was created, right? It was a very different time. It was driven through DARPA funding and a lot of university research. There was a lot of R&D going into this, and it was sort of built with this goal of the greater good, for humanity, open and interoperable standards from day one. This idea of universality, which is, if you think about it, a person can stand up a web server and they can build a web page. There's a URL that points to that web page. They can give that URL to anyone else in the world, and with any device, with any type of browser, they're able to access that web page, right? It seems incredibly basic, but it's a really, really important concept, right? It turns out that some of this has been structured in this idea of Rome in the context of the internet. Now, when we talk about the internet, we usually think about the lower level connectivity aspect. On top of that, we've got the web and the spatial web. But if you look at the definition for Rome, you know, human rights-based, open, accessible to all, multi-stakeholder participation, these concepts should apply just as well to the web or the spatial web as they do to the internet. And that's really what we're trying to focus on here. I don't know if anyone caught the XR Ethics Guild a couple days ago, but their philosophies line up very nicely with this as well. Jan-Erik, do you want to take the real world?
Yeah, so speaking of focus, also we're emphasizing this real world interaction with the dolphins together on the beach, having the fresh sea breeze, experiencing. So essentially, we're talking about building an infrastructure that allows users to truly interact with the real world around them, and where there's like an open platform that supports the seamless transition from a spatial, temporal, and social context to the next throughout the day, always providing relevant contextual information, applications, content, services. And if we're able to like up that with systems that has some form of real world understanding of your local environments, that will enable like superpowers that we haven't even thought about yet. So you want to take the next one?
Right. So open and interoperable, we touched on this a bit in the context of web principles. And of course, in the web, it was designed to be open and interoperable from day one, which was really important. But we also need to think about what we really mean when we say open and interoperable, right? So there are different layers to consider here. There are low-level protocols and encodings, but as we all know, if you take the web as an example, you can take standards like HTML and HTTP, and it's very easy for someone to build walled gardens on top of those, right? So we need to think about the higher-level spatial services that sit above these protocols, and think about building this open spatial ecosystem. So we get to a point where our content creators and users are not locked into particular platforms or devices or app stores.
I can take the next one. That's so fundamental. It's so fundamental that at the launch of our organization in 2018, we published a proposal for a manifesto, for a privacy manifesto for Air Cloud solutions. And we still stand by the wording of that manifesto. If we want to achieve a positive outcome for the future spatial web, we need to ensure at the design point of time, like how you can create distributed service architectures, how you can create security measures, policies, guidelines, maybe even a social contract for the real-world spatial web that ensures that there will be no comprehensive aggregation of sensitive, private, personal data by powerful entities, powerful organizations, or bad actors. So when you aggregate data, you aggregate your own personal data. You do not aggregate data about other people. So, do you want to take the next one? Oh, that's actually. Oh, sorry. I can take that one. So, building this infrastructure, we do intend to create this scalable architecture that will work across the whole planet for all people in all their diversity. So we truly hope that we are able and sort of humble enough that we can listen to as many people as possible on what they truly want for this spatial computing future, to allow people to take an active part and role in shaping the design, the way you build it, the way you operate this infrastructure. And if we're able to succeed in that way of doing it, we might contribute to what I call a digital renaissance that is far more fair and decentralized than the current state of tech, where like the big technology companies and their business models are sort of dominating all of the world with no regards for what people in different nations care about. So if we do this right, we can hopefully help individuals, communities, local businesses flourish to a much greater extent than what we see in the current web.
Thank you. And now we're always talking about Open Spatial Computing Platform. And I really would like to ask you to just elaborate on what is the Open Spatial Computing Platform.
So the Open Spatial Computing Platform is next slide. It is a working prototype of a decentralized open spatial web platform that runs at the city scale. We have batteries included. There are reference implementations of services and clients that you can find on our GitHub. We also, as I mentioned, there are test beds in campuses and cities in different locations in the world where anyone can go there and experiment with the platform, try it as end users or as developers or content creators. We also have some partners that are implementing support for these technologies. So that's sort of the overall thing. At its essence, there are three things. If you want to look at it as sort of the building blocks, like Legos, the most fundamental building blocks of this spatial computing future, there are three things we try to achieve. So first, we want to bind the real and the digital world together. We propose to do that using geopose. Secondly, there is a notion of a locally shared digital twin live that is encoded in a universal reality modeling language. And thirdly, we hope to provide seamless discovery of spatial content and services for users as they're moving through their lives. And the flip side also of that, to allow content creators or developers to publish to the spatial web without being hampered by like an app store or some other walled garden thing. I might, if I want to speak on some details.
Actually, I've been just told that we are running out of time soon, so I will switch to the next slide. And we will continue on our second session. And if you stay, we will be talking about Testbed initiative. And I will have this slide on the second session as well. So we're running out of time. So I would like to ask you for your final remarks. And then I will talk about this slide on our next session.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, you know, we can still maybe touch on Aurora Viewer a bit. So moving from the OSCP building blocks that we just quickly looked at, we can start to think about how this is actually being used in the real world. So Aurora Viewer is a really nice example of an open source initiative. It's a partnership between OpenAR Cloud, the Cosmos 5G Lab, George Mason University, and 3D Interactive. It's funded through an NGI Atlantic research grant. And essentially, all these components are open source. There are new elements here, new open source clients, model storage. There's early work to start developing an open source visual positioning service. And of course, it's also running implementations of OSCP, the various components that we just showed on the previous slide. All of this is actually live in an edge cloud on the Columbia University campus in New York, and it's working. This is really cool to see, and I encourage people to take a look at auroraviewer.org for more details.
Thank you very much, James and Jan-Erik. Now, I would like to just turn to our audience. We will have questions and answers at the end of the second session. So because we're running out of time, I think we would like to invite Susan and Julia onto the stage. 2 questions first. Oh, okay. So do we have any questions?
If you do have any questions, please feel free to step up to one of these great microphones that we have set up so that they can hear you.
Yeah, I can, if there's no questions. So we still have 10 minutes here. That's why we were a little bit.
Yeah, there was some overlap in the time. The great news is that, hey, we have a whole half hour left. So we're going to go ahead whenever you guys are done and invite our.
Oh, we have half an hour. Well, let's continue to call to action.
So, yeah.
And let me continue on the Testbed initiative then, real quickly. We have started a Testbed initiative. And what we're trying to do here is this is an open and ongoing effort to collect feedback from users, creators, developers, local authorities, local businesses. And we would like to actually involve all stakeholders and who are interested in open air cloud technologies. We have testbed campuses, university testbed partners around the globe, high school testbed partners, municipalities, 5 cities in the world that are testbed partners. So if anyone here in the audience or watching the recording later on, if you want to become a testbed partner, please reach out to us. You can reach out to me, or you can send an email to testbed@openaircloud.org. Now, I would like to turn to Jan-Erik and ask, other than Testbed, what else someone who is interested in supporting us do?
Yeah, I encourage everyone to become a member and voice your support for this vision that we're pursuing. Obviously, there's a way you can contribute as on the technical side with open source and standards development, but any kind of profession that relates to this in any way, like you're doing UX, you're doing art, you're interested in policy. There are multiple ways to contribute. Also, sponsor financially our efforts. If you're in the business, you're running spatial computing business, you should consider adopting those standards or the protocols that we're proposing, joining our test beds. And recently, the announcement of the XR Guild is so much overlap with our emphasis on ethics and values that we encourage also members to join the guild. So please do that.
And now we have a question. Yes, please.
Yeah, hi. I've been a big fan of this work for a while. I don't have a good technical background. I work on sort of XR policy. So I guess my sort of philosophical question to all of you is, how do you sort of think about the trade-offs between sort of open and interoperable and being privacy first? Because I guess I always see there's a little bit of a tension there. And you know, you look at the evolution of the internet, like we designed a lot of systems and protocols in a way to make them open and operable, but you know, privacy and security were sort of an afterthought that we've spent the past 30 years bolting things onto. So I guess I'm just curious how you think about that, because I guess I just struggle to figure out how you have a privacy first approach if you're going to let things be open to a lot of different people with different views on what data they should be collecting. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's the essential question, really. So when all the sensors and all the systems are collecting data, our position is that that data should not be aggregated and stored. It should be transient. And if you're sharing it, you should share it locally in just a short period of time. If you're aggregating any data, it should be your own data, not about any other people. And of course, it's one thing is to design it that way on a technical level. There are like a billion ways to circumvent that. That's why we also need laws and we need a social contract. This is how you ethically and morally behave. So there's no guarantee that you can create a foolproof way of ensuring that that privacy is maintained, but there's a way to build your society and design the infrastructure so that that is the default mode of operations. And that is what we're pursuing.
Yeah, I think another important aspect, as you mentioned, in the web, privacy and security were a bit of an afterthought, right? So if we take the approach where we're considering those aspects from day one and making sure that they're baked into every decision, that's sort of an important consideration. Also, the decentralization does help with this. So, if you don't need to be collecting user data, of course you shouldn't do that, right? But in scenarios where data is being exchanged, that data may be only resident in a given town or city. It doesn't need to necessarily leave that zone.
So I don't see any other questions, but we will be around after the session. So that was a great question. And please, if you have any questions, we'll be available and we will be asking questions. Thanks a lot for watching the first session. Now, thank you, James, and thank you, Jan-Erik and James. Yeah.
Thank you.